I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
And I am Love.
Yes, you are, Eli.
I'm Eli Sands.
And you're listening to Deep Cut. On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss that director's life and career to bring context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
We're about to talk about one of the greatest food movies of all time. And what would a great food movie be without an appetizer? If you're enjoying the show, please remember to give us a rating or a review and subscribe to us wherever you're listening to podcasts. Even if you're listening on a record player, still subscribe. I don't know how you figured that out, but well done. This will help other people discover the show. And you can also keep up with us at Deep Cut Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd, and Friendster. Might as well look.
Could be.
We're not on Friendster. Don't listen to you.
We're not on Friendster. Sorry. If you want to talk about this movie with us or discuss any other film or TV show, a webcomic you saw, a cave painting, a doodle that you made during class, please join us on our Discord server. If you're a big fan of the show, we've also recently launched a Patreon, which you can subscribe to for free to keep up with the show and our latest announcements through special Patreon posts that will only be available there. Click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials that we have mentioned here. Okay, boys. So, following our spontaneous recording on Challengers earlier this year, which we all instantly fell in love with, we're fleshing out a fuller, more official Deep Cut miniseries on the work of Italian melodrama maestro Luca Guadagnino. And there were a lot of contenders for our Deep Cut pick here, but this isn't really one that one of us chose. We kind of picked it together because it's an early favorite of ours. We saw it together in the melodrama class taught by our former professor, Lisa Dombrowski. And look, as I said, it's just one of the best food movies of all time.
It truly is. And I feel like you could go a lot of different directions with Guadagnino. And I think personally, we have our ties to other Guadagnino pictures. But I think if we're going to pick a deep cut pick, I would say this is like the most consensus of the movies. And it's quite fitting that the class that we all became friends in, we're like picking a movie from that class. And we're specifically picking a movie that Eli had to give a presentation on. So maybe you can talk about that experience.
We're just going to run the presentation now.
Yeah.
No, we're not.
So Eli, go ahead.
The end. If you've not seen I Am Love, heads up that we're going to get into spoilers and talking about the end of the movie as we always do. But overall, this movie is about Emma, played by Tilda Swinton, very subtly, who is the subordinate, caged matriarch of the Reiki family, a stolid, old money clan of industrialists in Milan, Italy, around the turn of the millennium. When Emma begins a passionate affair with Antonio, a talented chef, who her favored son Edo has befriended, she finds a food-based life of lush sensation, and the evolving style of the movie matches that growing lushness. In classic melodrama form, the cost of her ecstasy proves to be high, even as it may be the right choice for her personally. As I watched this movie and put together that phrase, il costo dell'ecstasy, I think this applies to a lot of Luca Guadagnino's work. Characters who are after some type of sensation, but the personal cost of it proves to be high. Do you feel like that's a thread that runs through his other movies, or am I pulling at straws here?
I think it makes sense. I mean, we see that in Challengers. I think you see it with all three characters maybe in certain ways. Yeah, and I guess even something like Bones and All is trying to do something like that. Even something like Suspiria is trying to do something like that. I think cost is an interesting word to use for that. Like the cost of the passion of X. And sometimes that's usually romantic love, but there's also like passion for dance, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think I like that a lot.
Cool. How was revisiting the movie this time for you all? Like, did your impression of it change from, well, actually, was melodrama the first time that you had seen the movie?
It was the first time I watched that movie in that class. And before that I had only seen A Bigger Splash. I felt really similarly about the strength of the direction in it. But I think this time around, knowing what the movie was about and sort of being able to track how the style changes as Emma becomes more open to love or falls into love or becomes love, it is so striking. This is like one of the first rewatches where I've been shocked about the rating that I gave it the last time. And it was already a 4. So I bumped it up to a full 5 because I think this is incredible and fantastic. And I think especially the scenes, like once we get going, once she has her first meal cooked by Antonio, there's really no turning back. It's such an iconic
Ratatouille moment.
Yeah, it's such an iconic scene. But you would think that, I don't know, you would think that it would sort of be paced in a slower kind of fashion. But right as that happens, you sort of get thrown through like this massive shift in Emma as a character, but also in the style of the movie. And I think that balance of restraint, but also being very loud formally, makes for such an impactful movie. Yeah, I'm just in awe. I'm in awe of how the camera moves. I'm in awe of how the edit moves. It's like seriously just a work of a master.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. This is my 2 cents.
Yeah. I had the essentially same experience as Wilson. I did the exact same thing, bumping it from a 4 to a friggin' 5. And I think less about the numbers, but also I think I had no recollection about this movie. It really didn't leave an impression on me the first time I watched it. And I think we were watching in that kind of shitty basement theater that's super uncomfortable. And you can see everyone in front of you. And I think watching it this time, something about watching it alone on my television screen maybe like worked better. Like, because it's kind of like a private movie about private feelings.
Ooh.
And so there's something almost transgressive about all the things you're seeing. And it feels like the movie is sharing a secret with you. And so watching it alone kind of worked really well for me. Like usually, of course, I'm going to tell you watch things in the cinema. And of course, this is going to play like gangbusters in the cinema. But I think because of that privacy of this film and the bigness of what it's showing you, it's able to kind of make that private connection as a solo viewer at home. Yeah, but it's multiple times in this movie I gasped and I had already seen it before. And I was just like, damn, this is just like, I don't know, like injecting something into my blood, right? Just multiple times. The editing, the movement, the score. Like from the first frame, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this music. I remember it. Yeah, like I forgot it and I was like instantly, it's like, I've heard this before. I remember this. I know this theme. Yeah, so the choices here are like extremely specific and very, very, I guess, eye-catching or ear-catching in a very strong way. And I think thinking about what you're saying about the cost of passion or like of love.
Il costo dell'ecstasy.
Oh, the cost of ecstasy, yes. I'm not going to do that. What's interesting is that I always find that Guadagnino always sells what you earn from that cost way harder than the cost. Like, yes, the cost is humongous.
Yes.
But the gain from the passion, it's undeniable. He makes it undeniable. So yeah, it's almost like of course I'm going to leave my fucking family. Of course. Like, let me do the craziest shit ever because I have to. And I think that's the kind of sensational melodrama he's so good at pushing. You know, and you see there are challenges as well. And I'm not going to say Bones and all, but I can't remember what else I've seen from him. But I mean, he's still...
Call Me By Your Name.
Yeah. And I think this is an interesting counterpoint to Call Me By Your Name, which is also a very famous Guadagnino film. And this one, I think, pushes the passion a little harder, as far as I can remember anyway, in terms of style. But you can see that through line, man, between these big Guadagnino films. Like, they have that... Like, I said that he molds himself to the film, but I don't know whether I agree with that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see
I
it.
feel like you're turning.
I'm turning.
You're
I'm
like...
here. I have love now.
Yeah. Cut to a few weeks ago when you were like, oh, I don't think I find anything distinguishable about Guadagnino and his style.
I
Look
feel
at
it
you
now.
now.
I'm changed. Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Hey, you picked the perfect movie to eat your words.
Oh, yep, that's how I feel about I'm Love right now.
Cool.
Eli, how do you feel about I Am Love?
I also bumped it up from a 4.5 to a 5. So at least my
Damn.
rating was higher than yours was initially. But
I don't have 4.5 stars on my rating, so
you don't do half stars? That's right. That's right. A good policy. I had such an interesting experience watching I Am Love today, where as I was watching, it was interspersed with cooking chicken soup for my mom who's sick. And that recipe that I made was my great grandmother's. And that recipe has been like passed down orally.
Damn.
Wow.
So it felt like funny timing to watch a movie where this familially important soup plays such a crucial plot role. And I was just thinking about mother-son dynamics and food as a point of connection. And after I had finished making the soup, I wound up watching the last 45 minutes or so on my laptop in my bed, and it really hit. It's just a pretty perfectly made movie. There have been points when we've covered movies on the show and we say, oh, is this like one of the best movies? Like Parasite. I would put I Am Love right up there.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I was thinking like, oh my God, this man is operating on a level that we rarely see these days. Like, I'm like, okay, maybe you, Lynn Ramsey, like, who else has such effortless control of like all the elements of filmmaking? Like, and can make mistakes feel intentional and like add meaning to the film and like just sort of do a little bit of world building using the like the camera mistakes or editing mistakes or just things that are not generally like the intended like directorial, like classic directorial moves.
I kind of think of Guadagnino as like Wong Kar-wai, but with his shit together a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know?
No,
like,
I
I
see
think,
that.
of course,
I see that.
Like
love Wong Kar-wai.
logistically together.
Yeah, like, and I don't know what else, but like Wong Kar-wai is great because he's experimenting very heavily, and that's how he's able to find just crazy ways of like really telling a story, and that's why they hit, but also sometimes why they don't hit. Guadagnino maybe pulls that back and finds not say formula, but a way to weaponize that kind of experimental approach with an eye for imperfection, an eye for looseness, and even with challenges being extremely more planned than any of his other films, it still has an eye for experimentation. It's experimentation through
It does.
preparation. So here is like his early work where he does a storyboard, like we said, right? So you feel that almost sometimes documentary like feel the feeling like they found the edit and the shots while on set and while in the editing room. So there's that kind of put together quality. So it's not this perfectly planned thing, but it works perfectly well because they stitched together like this magnificent little quilt. But I don't know, that's kind of how I think about it right now. Yeah. And I think that's also why some of his films are duds, because he's an experimenter. So that makes sense.
I like that you mention quilts, because one of the things that I think we should touch on is how this movie not only bakes in different imperfections, but brings many other artists into the conversation and uses their narratives to enhance that of Emma. So in particular, I'm thinking of quilts because of Sonia Delaunay, who is the author of that book that Emma buys in Sanremo, which is called Atelier Simultané, which is a book about Delaunay's art style, which is called simultané, which is simultaneousness or contrast living side by side. Delaunay was a Ukrainian-born artist who moved to France and married a French artist there. And the start of her simultané style was through making a quilt based on traditional Ukrainian Russo quilt making. And she made this for her son, And it was sort of a combination of European modernism and her Ukrainian background art style. You sort of see parallels there, right? Like the move from east to west and moving into a more European context, bringing some part of craftsmanship from Russia to Italy or France, and that shaping her lived place in this world. And that ultimately being the thing that contributes to the unraveling that is Edo's revelation about his mom's affair with Antonio.
I think there's a lot going on with the cultural context. It's a pretty dense film when you really think about it.
It's academic.
Yeah.
And the world building is so top notch. Like, you really get a sense of this like upper echelon, like Italian old money family, just from the way that they interact with each other, like the house itself, which is such a massive set or like part of this puzzle, and like the clothes that they wear, the new technology that they're using as well in the turn of the century. Every part of the world is so sketched in. It's like so detailed. Guadagnino like just knows precisely who these people are.
Actually, from the opening title cards, like he has that like classic credit sequence that you have at the start. But then immediately I was like, wait a minute, look at the font choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's Futura.
Half cursive and half modern, like advertising type face.
Futura, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's about tradition versus modernity and like about that transition, about this old family going to new things. You have this subplot about Emma's daughter coming out, being in love with a woman. Like that's all like about what happens when the old money is trying to get to new money, and what happens when you pass the torch from one generation to two generations below that, and what happens when you move from country to country, absolve your self-identity. There's like a lot going on here. And I'm kind of curious how you guys think it kind of talks to each other.
They're all in support of each other, right? Like, as you think about like Elisabetta sort of coming out to her mom, Emma finds out much earlier reading that letter. But after she has a conversation and she's sort of like is in the clear and she expresses her love for her girlfriend, we have a scene where Emma is driving to her daughter's show in Nice. And during this driving sequence, you have like voiceovers of previous conversations. So Emma expressing her love for her girlfriend, but also Antonio inviting Emma to the farm that he wants to set up a restaurant in. And sort of linking those two together, I think for Emma gives her the freedom to love, or the freedom to just express herself because she sees it in her daughter. And I knew that was the connection that was happening, but like the magic glue of that connection was like brought in that driving sequence with the voiceovers. And I think that's just such a brilliant like thing. I don't even know if this was scripted or if this was just found in the edit. It is like such an incredible choice that makes me understand Emma's intentions in the moment and like sort of fuels her passion even more.
This is a movie that is charted through its moments of transition, both plot-wise and in terms of style. So the introduction of montage components, like the one that you're describing, Wilson, only gets more and more frequent as the movie goes on, kind of stepping back once Edo dies and the mood takes a turn for the sour. But in the buildup of passion, there's more and more stylistic experimentation. And one thing I want to say is that the use of montage is, of course, originally a Russian technique, right? It's Eisenstein.
Tell us about Sergei.
Tell us about Strike.
So Sergei Eisenstein is, along with his other contemporaries in early Soviet filmmaking, are famous for pioneering the basic grammar of editing, where shot 1 plus shot 2 equals idea. this is based on communist philosophy that thesis plus antithesis equals synthesis.
Yeah.
Or maybe not Marxist ideology, not so much communist ideology. And the early Soviet filmmakers used this to a very intellectual means where they would combine juxtaposing images that were not part of the same contiguity, the same space alignment, in order to create a new meaning. So an example of this is from Eisenstein's film Strike, in which an uprising of factory workers is being put down brutally by local law enforcement who are in favor of the factory owner. And amidst this massacre, Eisenstein cuts to a bull being slaughtered, which, side note, is cited in Apocalypse Now by Francis Ford Coppola at the end, to very different ends. But this idea that different images coming together to form a new idea in the mind of the audience comes from Soviet filmmaking. So it makes sense that as Emma is getting more in touch with her buried Russian self, that technique, this very Russian film technique, would come to the fore increasingly. It's just funny.
I think about that montage in terms of like, there's like, to me, two kinds of montages. There's like the micro montage and the macro one. The micro one being like within the scene, how do you cut? So there are so many great micro montages here. Many of the scenes with Emma meeting Antonio, seeing Antonio, have just like incredible editing that create the sense of attraction, of lust, of love.
Of physical sensation.
Like the time when she bumps into him in Nice, which he engineers, and like the way it cuts
in San Remo.
It's so good. And so like those are micro montages which create feeling, or like when they kiss in that out of focus shot, incredible, where they're like in the woods.
Or when they're lying together in the grass and it cuts between flowers and bugs and their skin making contact in fine detail.
The birds and the bees, while they're doing what the birds and the bees do.
Birds and the bees.
So like those are just incredible micro montages that create sensation. But I think about the macro montage of like a film. A film is like many, many, many scenes. It's a montage of montages. And I think when you talk about the ending, Wilson, where she has this connection with her daughter and in a sense finds strength from her daughter's coming out for her to essentially come out of her shitty relationship, this extremely ugly man, to be with Antonio. It's like this kindred thing, and it reminds me of the ending of Challengers, which I will not spoil here. But the ending of Challengers is about a reveal of secrets with action and looks.
And eyeline.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yes.
yeah.
And here,
oh my God, Ben.
Same thing. The reveal of secrets and understanding through no more voiceover at this point, just looks. Because by using those montages and the montage of montages, he has imbued each character with a certain information. So, what's the daughter's name?
Except for the other brother.
Beta. Elisabetta.
Beta. Yeah. So, Beta, in a way, represents in her character, almost like as a metaphor or as a totem, this idea of transgression, of learning to be yourself. And so immediately you get that connection between these two women, and it just like works. And they don't talk, they don't say shit to each other, they just look at each other and cry, and then boom, she's out the door.
Oh.
And it just works. And I'm like, damn, who else does this?
You don't even see her go.
Who does this? Who can do this? I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.
Luca Guadagnino can.
Yeah, he can.
Those things that unlock the moments of change, we have to say, tend to be food. Food is the thing that unlocks desire and introduces new stylistic grammar into the lexicon of this movie. I want to know, like, what's the thing that you want to eat from this movie?
Oh, what do I want to eat? Sorry, I had the worst thought. I just said Tilda.
Oh, gosh. Sorry. Only
Sorry,
for
Tilda.
Antonio.
Well, unfortunately, to bridge into other double entendre, I want to try the eggplant with elderflower that Antonio makes for Edo.
Ooh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
Oh, what the heck? I didn't think about that at all. Eggplant
I
and
legitimately want to try that dish. It sounds good.
elderflower. What the fuck? Okay, unreal.
I
That's
really like the
unreal.
prawns. I like the prawns.
The light in the
They
room
looked
changes when she
delicious.
eats the
Yeah.
prawns.
The ratatouille
Yeah.
moment is incredible.
Because I forgot that scene existed. I forgot that was happening. So I like stopped. I was like, holy shit, this is too much for me. I stopped. I got on Discord. I texted you guys. Oh my God, guys. I can't believe this is happening in this movie. Went back. I rewinded like 3 minutes. I was like, okay, I'm going to take this whole scene again. I did that so many times this movie. I rewound. Like I never rewind. But there's so many moments in this movie that I was like, oh my God, I need to experience this. I need to experience this again.
It really is fun to revisit. And there were parts that I had forgotten as well, like Ben. So to re-experience.
What are the ones that stick out to you guys? Like that's that for the Tui moment.
We did a scene analysis of the bumping into at Nice scene between Antonio and Emma. And I think that has stayed in my mind. Like just her wandering, like her looking up at the church, and then like the moment where the music, the horn like kicks in and she's like when she spots him and she starts chasing him, it's so brilliant. It's brilliant.
Like I can't imagine shortlisting that actually. I feel like you just kind of had to find that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like the way that she looks and he's not there, and then he's there in the window and she goes out and he's not there, but boom, she's literally in his face.
Yes. And when they impact each other, like before that, it's like quick cuts. It's so many quick cuts. And then he bumps into her. And then what follows is this really long take as they both go to the truck together. And it's playing up with the pacing of this scene in a really great way. And I feel like Guadagnino just does this constantly through the film.
And like you think about the larger context of the rest of the film, well, there you have all these extremely boring high society party scenes,
Right.
which are like captured extremely in a like very stagnant, stale way. Like the first 15 minutes.
Lots of frame obstruction, dark lighting, cold colors.
Yeah, so I love this idea of her as this caged matriarch where like she's just in this dollhouse and nothing's going on and she's bored. And of course, Antonio is the one to break her out of it, right? Whether it's with food or with passion or with love or with sex, like that's kind of what's going on. And using that editing, that speed, that confusion to contrast her life, which is very, I don't know, sterile and stagnant.
Yeah. Guadagnino is choosing to activate every sense in that coming to life that Emma has. There's, of course, taste. There's, of course, sight, like her witnessing Antonio taking off his clothes when they first arrive to his property. There's also smell, like when she smells the plants in Antonio's garden. There's touch, when the fine tactile details that Guadagnino chooses to focus on in that kind of Ramsey-ish way, Wilson, right? Of like hands touching, Ado touching the strand of hair.
Yeah.
Antonio's hands going over Emma's body. But there's also sound.
Antonio's balls dragging across her thigh.
Say it again.
Antonio's balls dragging across her thigh.
Oh my God.
That's in this film, guys. I was like, oh, okay.
It is there. It's there.
I was like, oh, this is not fake, I think.
It's there. There's also sound, though. When Emma eats the prawn, do you remember what she hears? Or what the audience hears? You hear the cooking process.
Oh.
You hear things
yeah.
sizzling and chopping happening. It's like she hears the work that goes into the food when she tastes it.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. Every sense is activated in this movie. Every sense. So if that's how Guadagnino brings the ecstasy to life of Emma and brings us into that ecstasy, also we're saying that our increasing subjective access to her aligns with her increasing joy. Like she's being witnessed and seen and known by Antonio and by us. If that's how the ecstasy happens, the cost comes through these melodrama staples. The constricting marriage, the jealous children, object transference that comes to betray her, these reversals, revelations, and of course the loss of Ado. And also the women who get left behind as Emma leaves the house.
And when it all stacks up against her passion, it falls. Nothing comes close.
Which is Guadagnino's great subversion. It's not a melodrama that winds up punishing her in the end, as many early melodramas in film history do. This reaffirms the need for her to pay that cost.
Yeah. The melodrama more like acts as a vehicle rather than be the actual like emotional impact of the film, because Guadagnino knows it's in her love for Antonio and her freedom and her becoming who she was before.
Yeah, well said. It's a set of tools that Guadagnino applies rather than adhering his movie to the genre staples of melodrama.
Yeah. I guess because melodrama is a pretty difficult to define
Yeah.
term, because it's like, is it a storytelling template? It's not. Is it just a bunch of stylistic things? No. Is it just being sensational? Not maybe, but it's kind of this thing where it's made up of 5 different things, but you only need 1 or 2 of those things to be melodramatic. Right? And so in this case, it's like maybe the aim for sensationalism, for heightened feelings of ecstasy or tragedy. That's the melodrama that's happening in I'm Love. And of course, it adds some kind of story structure that relates to, I guess, other kinds of melodrama, like the thing that you want and the cost that you have to pay. And that cost being just gigantic, right? So, I don't know, it's a really good melodrama. And I'm always thinking about like, why do some melodramas work for me and why do some not? And I can't really answer that question right now. And I'm wondering what it is that makes some feel phony and some not. And I think that's like the big question. I think it's always about phoniness, right? Melodramas that, when people criticize movies for being melodramatic, it's usually because of a feeling of manipulation or phoniness. And I'm not saying this film isn't manipulating me, but I'm kind of enjoying it, so it's okay. Right? Is it just that or what? I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, I think there's something to say about like matching tone to story with a lot of melodramas. Like I feel like there are some melodramas where like the dramatic elements of the story like sort of outweigh how it's being told, and you're like, this is not believable. Or like the tone sort of over sensationalizes a pretty like by the books story. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like if there's a mismatch there, it doesn't quite work for me. But to be honest, most melodramas really work for me.
I'm definitely not the same. Like, I think I definitely have those films where, like, maybe you might like Wilson, where I think it doesn't have enough. Maybe it's kind of like this content versus presentation thing. Like, melodrama is like a way of presenting, but it's also about story, which is like the content. But when there's a gap between those two, then I feel the gap and it doesn't work. I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Yeah. And I think it makes sense. So I guess it's about a personal gauge of what gap is enough and works for you. Yeah.
To zero in on one of these melodrama staples, I'm curious to parse out with you both Eido's death as a plot necessity. Like, what does it mean that Eido narratively has to die, or just does die in the course of this story? His death is very upsetting, and it does feel like a cost in relation to Emma's freedom. And I'm wondering how it balances out in the equation for you both.
I think it's so beautifully placed because I feel like the fact that Eido finds out sort of lights a fire under Emma's bottom. I don't know how else to put it, but he puts her on the spot. And I think he presents a problem logistically for Emma to continue this affair with her son knowing. And I think his death brings to Emma a choice, right? She can either... Well, she has multiple choices. She doesn't have to see Antonio ever again, or she can continue this charade and keeping this from her family, or she can do what she chose to do at the end, which was fully set herself free. And I think Eido's death puts the ball back on Emma's court. So remove all the grief associated with it. But I think for me, it presents her a choice of whether or not to like really pursue her desire.
I think about Eido because he's interesting as a character.
Yeah.
Like you think about what he represents. What does Edo represent?
Hard to say.
So there's a few things going on here. So he is the third generation in the three generations we see. So the grandfather passes away, hands over the company to his son as well as his grandson because he thinks he's so big that only two people can succeed him, which is a stupid business decision. I'm sorry. That's fucking dumb. Anyway, so he's like, I'm such a big personality that two men equal one man, right? So that's interesting. But there's an inversion where Edo is actually more traditional than his father.
Yes.
Or at least more idealistic.
Yeah, but he more idealistic, but he is more about values, where his father just wants to move the company into modern times, which is it's kind of a flip, right? Usually it's the other way. So
Yeah.
he represents, in a way, more tradition, or like a baby version of his grandfather's tradition.
Yeah, his namesake.
Yeah. And also he represents Emma's connection with her Russian heritage, right? Because before he dies, they talked in Russian.
Yes. And he criticizes Emma for giving Antonio her uka recipe, the soup that she makes from Russia.
Even though Edo is young, he represents a lot about the things that she stuck to, her feelings about Russia, her feelings about being in this family. So he represents all these baggage, I guess you could say. Because it also doesn't have this like, oh, she should go back to her Russian roots, like her heritage is more important. It's not about that at all, right? This film is about the future, not the past. And so she's a woman going for her future, and her future happens to be Antonio in a sense in this point in time. And so you see the contrast between Edo as well as Beta, because Beta then represents the future in the sense that she is representing sexuality that is not common in their traditional kind of mindset. And she's a woman, and then she also has this thing where she's like, I'm going into photography right now. So she's doing a lot of things which are new that the old establishment is not into, and that she is afraid of them not being into. So even though Edo and Beta are in the same generation, Edo represents, in a sense, the older generation, and Beta is the new one. So when Edo dies, there's this metaphorical sense that old stuff is dying, and she's embracing the new stuff, which is what Beta kind of represents, right? And this is a very metaphorical way of reading the film, but I think Guadagnino has put enough information in this that you can read it in a literary way, not just in a immediate sensation way. But that's a crazy thing. This is a film with the immediate sensation as well as the deep-rooted literary denseness that he's doing, which is like wild.
Beautifully said.
And also going back to like a sort of sensation kind of way, there is a sort of very intimate connection that Antonio and Edo have with each other that is like not just on the surface like homoerotic. Like I think there's definitely something there, rivals to friends to business partners, and the way they interact with each other, and the way that like I feel like the only two people that really like get Antonio's food is Emma and Edo.
Yeah.
And they both share this. So I think when he finds out through the soup, there's a heartbreak in both ways, I think. Like, I think he's in love with Antonio in a way.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't show this affection to his wife at all. Like this amount of affection to his wife. Like it is so much of it is channeled to Antonio in this film.
Right.
It's such an interesting and weird dynamic that Guadagnino still manages to pull off quite cleanly.
Is fucking your friend's mom gay?
Fellas.
But so I've been thinking about that because in a way, Edo has a very mommy's boy relationship with his mother. He's also in love with his mother. You know, his mother is very beautiful and he marries a very beautiful woman. So the betrayal isn't just Antonio, but also Antonio comes in between him and his mother.
Yes.
You know, that sacred relationship to him. You know, so it's both this homoerotic as well as this Oedipal relationship that crisscrossing in a very like, I don't know what the way is, but in some way that is very fascinating to unpack, right? And I think you're dead on. Like, there's obviously a homoerotic tension between him and Antonio. Because I forgot this entire movie. I was like, oh, is he gonna like fuck Antonio? Like, is that happening? You know, is that where we're going with this? Like, all the kids gay, but that's not what happens. But it's still kind of there.
It is absolutely there.
Yeah.
To put an image to this, and since we're going to Oedipal already, I'm going to add in Freud.
Okay.
Oh.
In that moment when Edo reintroduces Emma to Antonio in the Reiki kitchen, Antonio is making a dish with a blowtorch, and he instructs Emma how to use it. And kind of in the same manner of like Patrick Swayze in Ghost, he goes kind of behind her and holds the blowtorch in a certain position, extending from Emma as Edo's watching to try blowtorching this dish that Antonio's making. And it does look like that's the image that kind of captures it. This crisscrossing dynamic.
Edo eats it, and then his mom eats it.
Yeah.
Edo
And he shares it. And yeah, like even the biting is so sensual in that scene, like biting of the dish. Like I just remember that as well. Oh gosh.
They're the only two characters in the movie who kiss on the mouth. It's Edo and Emma and Antonio and Emma, I think.
Yep.
No, actually, that's not true.
Yes, I think
the only people who
Yeah.
Beta also has a scene with her boyfriend. Yeah, earlier on.
Edo and his wife also kiss. Yeah. at the
I'm
party.
out here making wrong claims. Forgive me.
It's okay. People be kissing in this movie.
Yeah, the only person who eats any food in this movie is Emma. It's crazy.
Yeah. Actually, okay, so I wanted to ask how you guys read the... Like, it took me a second to understand how Edo understood what was going on. I was a bit confused.
Oh, this is the scene that I broke down in my old presentation.
Montage editing. Go for it, Eli.
But I was confused as to why we cut to Eva at the start of the film serving the soup to herself. I didn't get that. And as far as I could tell, they were different soups, but I don't know.
You know, that's interesting, thinking about our conversation about Edo feeling that Emma passing on the soup to Antonio is a betrayal, because that flash of Eva reminds us that Edo has effectively passed on his mother's cooking to Eva, his wife. So maybe there's a recognition that he's betrayed the mom-son relationship a little bit, which he's allowed to do, but she isn't. That doesn't seem fair. If that's part of his realization, it's also the lock of hair that was at Antonio's house. It's putting together that the dress that Emma's wearing is in the style of Sonia Delaunay, who is the art book that Emma buys when she meets Antonio in Sanremo. It's the uka. Am I missing anything? I think those are the major components of...
Yeah. But delivered in like such a quick flash. It's like 5 seconds of
It's so quick.
many shots that hit you.
And you can miss points of that, but you still emotionally know what he is realizing. And that's what's important.
Yeah, like I knew what he was realizing, but I couldn't figure out how he got there, but it was fine. Like I got it. Yeah, like just by nature of the look.
Yeah, I think it was mostly the soup. I think it was the soup.
Yeah. For me, it was mostly just the look. And then like I was like, this guy just understood something. He just got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one other component actually I'm realizing. I think that there's a shot of Antonio turning around to see Edo come into the kitchen after it's a callback to when Antonio is having a reverie, imagining being with Emma romantically, and then he turns around as Edo comes into the kitchen. It's almost like that moment of montage is what Edo is seeing in his own montage of realization.
Interesting.
Wow.
Insane movie.
It's so densely layered.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about like language, Italian and Russian. The fact that Tilda Swinton, who also co-produced and developed this movie with Guadagnino, is speaking Italian in a Russian accent.
How'd she do that?
The level of detail
Some
here.
mega mind level shit.
How'd she do that?
I do not know.
I'm so glad that Tilda found Luca or Luca found Tilda. I don't know how this working relationship came to be, but I'm sure her support of him as a internationally renowned actress already at this time really like helped with his career. I hope they work together again.
Yeah. I mean, Tilda's one of the greats, and not just in like terms of her skill, but also just like she knows what good art is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm
Yeah.
just like-
Well, similar with Guadagnino. They're both like you could tell that he's such a art connoisseur through all the movies that he makes.
Maybe as the last artist to touch on, it's worth saying that Swinton and Guadagnino say that they structured this movie around the pieces composed by John Adams that are throughout this movie. They wrote the movie around those pieces, then brought that story to Adams to get his approval to use the music because he had denied it before. And then he gave them approval because he liked the story. That's such a lovely meeting of artists, Swinton, Guadagnino, Adams, to create this beautiful piece. It works. It's so tasty, and they let him cook.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's cooking. He's cooking.
Lost in the sauce.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a sexy movie. Sexy, 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 sexy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I was made to rewatch this, guys.
Same here.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I really was just like, I don't remember this movie at all. I don't know if I'm even going to like it.
Lo and behold.
I love having the experience of being wrong and being like, oh my God.
It's the best.
It is so good. So what do we say? What do we say? Should we do another one?
Another one.
Maybe this can be one that
Let's do one I hate.
I would be willing to do more Guadagnino. Maybe not immediately, but down the road.
We'll let it breathe for a little bit. We'll visit another director and then maybe we'll come back. I'm just curious, for my own personal sake, hearing you talk about why you don't like Suspiria that much, and also getting myself to watch Suspiria for the first time. So,
You still haven't seen it?
yeah, I've been sort of holding off because Eli's been so anti-Suspiria.
I'm famous online for not liking that movie.
Yeah. I'm excited about Queer and like whatever he's doing with Kritsky.
Yes.
Like, what the fuck's going on there? After challenges, what will these two cook up next? I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. As am I. Thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. Please rate and review because that helps us keep making the show and it helps others discover the show as well. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll know when our next episode drops. Keep up with Deep Cut on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd at Deep Cut Pod, and you can join us to talk about movies on our Discord server. We now have a free Patreon, and if you want to follow us there, you'll receive special, unique updates on that Patreon feed about our work and what we're planning, and who knows, maybe you'll even see an occasional movie doodle from me. So click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find our Patreon, Discord, and all the other socials that we've mentioned here. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands. This episode was edited by Bouchard, and our cover art is designed by Justina Yam. Our theme song is composed by me, Eli Sands.
I'm Wilson.
I am Ben.
I'm Eli. Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time. Il costo dell'ecstasy.
Ooh.
Wait, that was terrible. Il costo dell'ecstasy.
Bene.
Prego. That's
Molto
that's my
bene.
favorite Italian word. Molto bene.
Molto bene, yep. Terrible.
Shoot him.